Om Guru Brahma Guru Vishnum Guru Devo Maheshwaraha Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Om Ganantva Ganapati Gammavahe Kavim Kavinam Upavashravastramam Jeshtarajam Brahmanan Brahmanaspada Anushrunnoti Bisena Sadhanam. Om Mahaganadipataye Namaha. Om Keshvaya Namaha. Om Narayana Namaha. Om Madhavaya Namaha. Om Govindaya Namaha. Om Vishnuvaya Namaha. Matsudaya Namaha. Trivikramaya Namaha. Vamanaya Namaha. Sridharaya Namaha. Hrishikesha Padmanabhaya Namaha. Damodaraya Namaha. Sankarshnaya Namaha. Vasudevaya Namaha. Pradyumnaya Namaha. Aniruddhaya Namaha. Purushottamaya Namaha. Dokshaya Namaha. Narasimhaya Namaha. Achyutaya Namaha. Jaragrahapedraya Namaha. Hare Namaha. Sri Krishnaya Namaha. Dear friends and devotees, we completed 11th canto yesterday. We are going to start the 12th canto. That's called Dvadasha Skandha of the Bhagavata Purana. In this first chapter of the 12th canto, the dynasties of Kaliyuga Rajas, the Varnana, description of kings of Kaliyuga. The 12th canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, begins with Srila Çukadeva Gosvämé predicting the kings of the earth who will appear in the future during the age of Kaliyuga. So this is actually a prediction of Shuka Maharshi. What is going to happen in Kaliyuga, he was telling to Parékñit Mahäräja. This is a future during the age of Kali. Then he gives the description of the numerous faults of the Kaliyuga, after which the presiding goddess of the earth sarcastically berates the foolish members of the kingly order who perpetually try to conquer her. Next, Çukadeva Gosvämé explains the 4 varieties of material annihilation, and then he gives his final advice to Maharaja Parékñit. Thereafter, King Parékñit is bitten by the snake bird Takshaka and leaves this world. Actually, King Parékñit has reached moksha by listening to the Bhagavata Purana. He went to heaven. This snake coming to kill Parékñit is not real punishment, because he already reached heaven before the Takshaka comes and touch the Parékñit Maharaja. Suta Goswami concludes his narration of Srimad Bhagavatam to the sages at Naimisharanya forest by enumerating the teachers of the various branches of the Vedas and Puranas, relating to the pious story of Markandeya Rishi glorifying the Supreme Lord in his universal form and his expansion as the sun god, summarizing the topics discussed in this literature and offering final benedictions and prayers. The first chapter of this canto briefly describes the future kings of the dynasty of Magadha kingdom and how they became degraded because of the influence of the age of Kali. There were 20 kings who ruled in the family of Puru in the dynasty of the sun god Surya Vamsha, counting from Uparichara, Vasu to Puranjaya. After Puranjaya, the lineage of this dynasty will become corrupted. Following Puranjaya, there will be 5 kings known as Pradyottanas, who are then followed by the Sushnugas, the Mauryas, the Shungas, and Kanvas. 30 kings of Andhra nation, 7 Abhiras, 10 Gardhabis, 16 Kanakas, 8 Yavanas, 14 Tarukshas, 10 Gurundas, 11 Maulas, 5 Kalikila monarchs, and 13 Baklikas. After this, different regions will be ruled over at the same time by 7 Andhra kings, 7 Kausalas, the king of Vidura and the Nishadas. Then the power of rulership in the countries of Magadha and so forth will fall to kings who are no better than Shudras and Mlechas and are totally absorbed in irreligion. This is what the Kaliyuga brought. This is the summary of this first chapter. We will start the few shlokas. Parékñit Raja is asking, Swadhamanugite Krishna yadvamsha vishvishane kansavamsho bhavatrita metadhyachakshame manu. Parékñit Raja Kirtane, when Bhagavan Krishna returned to his Vaikuntha Loka, Goloka, what happened among the kings of the present kings? Who is ruling? This is what he was asking. That's why Shuka Maharshi said, there are so many kings, one after the other coming. The Shuka Vacha, Yotyam Puranjayo Namo, Bhagyo Bhavrudrato Nripaha, Tasya Matrastu Shunuko, Atva Swamin Matmajam. The last king mentioned in our previous enumeration of the future rulers of Magadha dynasty was Puranjaya, who will take birth as the descendant of Brahmadrata. Puranjaya's minister Shaunaka will assassinate the king and install his own son Pradyuta on the throne. The son Pradyuta will be the Palaka, his son and will be Vishakyapyu, and his son will be Rajaka. The son of Rajaka will be Nandivardhana, and thus in the Pradyutna dynasty there will be 5 kings who will enjoy the earth for 138 years. Nandivardhana will have a son named Sushnaga, and his son will be known as Kakavarna. The son of Kakavarna will be Kshemadharma, and the son of Kshemadharma will be Kshetrajna. The son of Kshetrajna will be Vidishira, and his son will be Ajatasatru. Ajatasatru will have a son named Darbaka, and his son will be Ajaya. Ajaya will father a second Nandivardhana, whose son will be Mahanandi. O best of Kurus, these 10 kings of the Shishnaga dynasty will rule the earth for a total of 360 years. During the age of Kali, my dear Parékñit, King Mahanandi will father a very powerful son in the womb of Shudra woman. He will be known as Nanda and will be the master of millions of soldiers and fabulous wealth. He will wreak havoc among the Kshatriyas, and from that time onward, virtually all kings will be irreligious Shudras. Here is a description of how authentic political authority degenerated and disintegrated throughout the world. There is a supreme Godhead, and there are saintly, powerful men who have taken the rule of the government leaders and represented the Godhead on earth. With the advent of the age of Kali, however, transcendental system of government collapsed, and unauthorized, uncivilized men gradually took the reins of power. That Lord Mahapadma, King Nanda, will rule over the entire earth just like a second Parshurama, and no one will challenge his authority. That Lord of Mahapadma, the King Nanda, will rule over the entire earth just like a second Parshurama, and no one will challenge his authority. In the 8th verse of this chapter, it was mentioned that King Nanda would destroy the remnants of the Kshatriya order. Therefore, he is here compared to Lord Parshurama because he kills the Kshatriya class 21 times in a previous age. He will have 8 sons headed by Somalya, who will control the earth as a powerful kings for 100 years. A certain Brahmana Chanakya will betray the trust of the King Nanda, and his 8 sons will destroy their dynasty. In their absence of Mauryas will rule the world as the age of Kali continues. Sridhara Swami, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakura both confirm that the Brahmana mentioned here is Chanakya, also known as Kautilya or Vatsayana. The great historical narration of Srimad Bhagavatam, which began with the events prior to the cosmic manifestation, now reaches into the realm of modern recorded history. Modern historians recognize both the Maurya dynasty and Chandragupta, the king mentioned in the following verse. Saeva Chandraguptam vai Bijo Rajyo Vishishtataha. Saeva Chandraguptam vai Bijo Rajye Vishikriti Tatsuto Dari Paharastu Tataschoka Vardhanaha. The Brahmana will enthrone Chandragupta, whose son will be named as Varishara. The son of Varishara will be Ashokavardhana. Ashokavardhana will be followed by Suyasa, whose son will be Sangatha. His son will be Salisuka. Salisuka's son will be Somasharma, and Somasharma's son will be Tadhavana. His son will be known as Brahadrata. There are so many kings, one after the other becomes a king. That's what the narration was. It is not easy to remember every names. O best of Kurus, these 10 Maurya kings will rule the earth for 137 years of the Kaliyuga. 137 years of the Kaliyuga was ruled by the Maurya kings. Although 9 kings are mentioned by name, Dasharatha appeared after Sujeshya before the rule of Sangatha, and thus there are 10 Maurya kings. My dear King Parékñit, Agnimitra will follow as a king, and then Sujeshta. Sujeshta will be followed by Vasumitra, Bhadraka, and the son of Bhadraka is Pulinda. Then the son of Pulinda named Ghosha will rule, followed by Vajramitra, Bhagavataha, and Devabhuti. In this way, O most eminent of Kuru heroes, 10 Sangha kings will rule over the earth for more than 100 years. Then the earth will come under the subjugation of the kings of Kanva dynasty, who will manifest very few good qualities. According to Sridhara Swami, the Sangha dynasty began when General Pushpamitra killed his king Brahadrata and assumed power. After Pushpamitra came Agnimitra and the rest of the Sangha dynasty, which lasted for 112 years. Vasudeva, an intelligent minister coming from the Kanva family, will kill the last of the Sangha kings, a lusty named Devabhuti, and assume rulership himself. Apparently, because King Devabhuti was lusty after the wives of other men, his minister killed him, assuming leadership and thus beginning the Kanva dynasty. The son of Vasudeva will be Bhumitra, and his son will be Narayana. These kings of the Kanva dynasty will rule the earth for 345 more years. 345 more years of the Kaliyuga. The last of the Kanvas, Susharma, will be murdered by his own servant, Bali, a low-class Shudra of the Andhra race. This most degraded Maharaja Bali will have control over the earth for some time. Here is a further description of how uncultured men infiltrated government administration. The so-called king named Bali is described as Asatama, a most impious, uncultured man. The brother of Bali named Krishna will become the next ruler of the earth. His son will be Sanatkarana, and his son will be Purnamsha. The son of Purnamsha will be Lambodara, who will be father Maharaja Chibalika. From Chibalika will come Meghaswati, whose son will be Atmana. The son of Atmana will be Anistukarma. His son will be Halaya, and his son will be Talaka. The son of Talaka will be Purishabru. The following him, Sunandana, will become king. Sunandana will be followed by Chikora and the 8th Bahus, among whom Shivaswati will be the great subduer of enemies. The son of Shivaswati will be Gomati. His son will be Puriman, whose son will be Medashira. His son will be Shivaskanda, and his son will be Yajnashri. The son of Yajnashri will be Vijaya, who will have 2 sons, Chandravijna and Lomadi. These 30 kings will enjoy sovereignty over the earth for a total of 456 years, O favorite son of Kuru. Saptavira avbruta dashagarbad binonpaha kanka shodasha bhupalam bhavishyantatilolupaha. Then will follow the kings of Abira, since from this chick of Avabhrithi, and then 10 Gardhabas. After them, 16 kings of Kanakas will rule and will be known for their excessive greed. 8 Yavanas will then take power, followed by 14 Turushkas, 10 Gurandas, and 11 kings of Mola dynasty will rule the king later. These Abiras, Gardhabis, Kankas will enjoy the earth for 1099 years, and the Molas will rule 300 years. When all of them have died off, there will appear the city of Kilakila's dynasty of kings consisting of Bhutananda, Wangiri, Shishunandi's brother Yashwanandi, and Pravarika. These kings of Kilakara will hold away for about total of 106 years. The Kilkilas will be followed by their 13 sons, Bahalikas, and after them King Pushpamitra, his son Durmitra, 7 Andhras, 7 Kaushalas, and also kings of Vidura and Nishada provinces will separately rule in different parts of the world. There will then appear a king of the Magadha named Vishwapuri, who will be like another Puranjaya. He will turn all the civilized classes into low class, uncivilized men in the same category as Pulindas, Yadus, and Madrakas. Foolish king Vishwapurji will maintain all the citizens in ungodliness and will use his power to completely disrupt the Kshatriya order. From his capital, Padmavati, he will rule that part of the earth extending from the source of the Ganga to Prayaga. At that time, the Brahmanas of such provinces as Saurashtra, Avanti, Abira, Shura, Arubdha, and Malava will forget all their regulative principles, and the members of the royal order in these places will become no better than Shudras. The land along the Sindhu River, as well as the districts of Chandrabhaga, Kaunti, and Kashmira will be ruled by Shudras. Fallen Brahmanas and meat eaters, having given up the path of Vedic civilization, they will have lost all spiritual strength. There will be many such uncivilized kings ruling at the same time, O King Parékñit, and they will all be uncharitable, possessed of fierce tempers, and great devotees of irreligion and falsity. These barbarians, in the guise of the kings, will devour the citizenry, murdering innocent women, children, cows, and brahmanas, and coveting the wives and property of other men. They will be erratic in their moods, have little strength of character, and be very short-lived, indeed not purified by any Vedic rituals, and lacking in the practice of regulative principles. They will be completely covered by the modes of passion and ignorance. These verses give a concise, accurate description of the fallen leaders of this age. The citizens governed by these low-class kings will imitate the character, behavior, and speech of their rulers. Harassed by their leaders and by each other, they will all suffer ruination. At the end of the 9th canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, it is stated that Ripunjaya or Puranjaya, the first king mentioned in this chapter, ended his rule about 1000 years after the time of Lord Krishna. Since Lord Krishna appeared approximately 5000 years ago, Puranjaya must have appeared about 4000 years ago. That would mean that Vishwapuriji the last king mentioned, would have appeared approximately in the 12th century of the Christian era. Modern Western scholars have made the false accusation that Indian religious literature has no sense of chronological history, but the elaborate historical chronology described in this chapter certainly refutes that name assessment. Thus end the purports of the humble servants of His Divine A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada to the 12th canto, first chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Degraded Dynasties of Kaliyuga. Next chapter, second chapter, Symptoms of Kaliyuga. What are the symptoms of Kaliyuga described? This chapter, second chapter of the 12th canto, relates that when the bad qualities of the age of Kali will increase to an intolerable level, the Supreme Personality of Godhead will descend as a Kalki to destroy those who are fixed in irreligion. After that, a new Satsanga, Satyayuga will begin. As the age of Kali progresses, all good qualities of men diminish and all impure qualities of increases. Aesthetic systems of so-called religion become predominant, replacing the courts of Vedic law. The kings become just like highway bandits. The kings become just like highway bandits. The people in the general become dedicated to low occupations, and all the social classes became just like Shudras. All cows becomes like goats. All spiritual hermitages become like materialistic homes, and family ties extend no further than the immediate relationship of marriage. When the age of Kali was almost ended, the Supreme Personality of Godhead will incarnate. He will appear in the village of Sambala, in the home of the exalted Brahmana Vishnu Vyasa, and will take the name of Kalki. He will mount his horse Devadatta, and taking his sword in the hand, will roam about the earth, killing millions of bandits in the guise of kings. Then the signs of the next Satya Yuga will begin to appear. When the moon, sun, and the planet, Brihaspati, enter simultaneously into one constellation and conjoin in the lunar mansion Pushya, Satya Yuga will begin. In the order of Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga, the cycle of 4 ages rotates in the society of living entities in this universe. The chapter ends with a brief description of the future dynasties of the sun and moon coming from Vaikuëöha Manu in the next Satya Yuga. Even now, 2 saintly Kshatriyas are living who at the end of this Kali Yuga will reunite the pious dynasties of the sun god, Vaivasvan, and the moon god, Chandra. One of these kings is Devapi, a brother of Maharaja Shantanu, and the other is Maru, a descendant of Ikshwaku. They are biding their time incognito in a village named Kalapa. Shuka Maharishi explains, then, O king, religion, truthfulness, cleanliness, tolerance, mercy, duration of life, physical strength, and memory will all diminish day by day because of the powerful influence of the age of Kali. During the present age, Kali Yuga, practically all desirable qualities will gradually diminish. As described in this verse, for example, dharma, which indicates a respect for a higher authority that leads one to obey religious principles, and will also diminish. In the Western world, theologians have been unable to scientifically present, but the laws of God are indeed God Himself, and thus in the Western intellectual history, a rigid dichotomy has arisen between the theology and science. In an attempt to resolve this conflict, some theologians have agreed to modify their doctrines so that they conform not only to proven scientific facts, but even to pseudoscientific speculations and hypotheses, which though unproven, are hypocritically included within the realm of science. On the other hand, some fanatical theologians disregard the scientific method altogether and insist on the veracity of their antiquated sectarian dogmas. Thus, bereft of systemic Vedic theology, material science has moved into the destructive realm of gross materialism, while speculative Western philosophy has drifted into the superficiality of realistic ethics and inconclusive linguistic analysis. With so many of the best Western minds dedicated to materialistic analysis, naturally, much of the Western religious life, separated from the intellectual mainstream, is dominated by the irrational fanatism and unauthorized mystic and mystery cults. People have become so ignorant of the science of God and that they often lump the Krishna consciousness movement in that in with this odd assortment of financial attempts to theology and religion. The dharma of the true religion, which is strict and conscious obedience to the God's laws, is diminishing. Satyam, the truthfulness, is aiming, also diminishing, simply because of people do not know what the truth is. Without knowing the absolute truth, one cannot clearly understand the real significance of the purpose of the life, merely by amassing huge quantities of relative or hypothetical truth. Kshama, the tolerance or forgiveness, is diminishing as well, because there is no practical method by which people can purify themselves and thus become free of envy. Unless one is purified by chanting the holy names of the Lord in an authorized program of spiritual improvement, the mind will be overwhelmed by anger. Unless one is purified by chanting the holy names of the Lord in an authorized program of a spiritual improvement, the mind will be overwhelmed by anger, envy, and all sorts of small-mindedness. Thus, daya or mercy is also decreasing. All living beings are certainly eternally connected by their common participation in the divine existence of the God. When this existence oneness is obscured through atheism and agnosticism, people are not inclined to merciful to one another. They cannot recognize their self-interest in promoting the welfare of other living beings. In fact, people are no longer even merciful to themselves. They systematically destroy themselves through the liquor, drugs, tobacco, meat eating, sexual promiscuity, and whatever other cheap gratificatory process are available to them. Because of all these self-destructive practice and the powerful influence of time, the average lifespan is also decreasing. Modern scientists seeking to gain credibility among the mass of people often publish statistics supposedly showing that the science has increased the average duration of the life. But these statistics do not take into account the number of people killed through the cruel practice of abortion. But those statistics do not take into account the number of people killed through the cruel practice of abortion. When we figure aborted children into the life expectancy of the total population, we found that the average duration of life has not at all increased the age of Kali, but it is rather decreasing drastically. Balam, bodily strength, is also decreasing. The Vedic literature states that 5,000 years ago, in the previous age, human beings and animals and plants were larger and stronger. With the progress of age Kali, physical stature, strength will gradually diminish. Certainly, smriti, the memory, is weakening. In former ages, human beings possessed some superior memory, and thus also I did not encumber themselves with a terrible bureaucratic and technical society as we have done. Thus, essential information and abiding wisdom were preserved without recourse to writing. Of course, in the age of Kali, things are dramatically different. In Kaliyuga, Wealth alone will be considered the sign of man's good birth, proper behavior, fine qualities. And law and justice will be applied only on the basis of one's power. Man and woman will live together merely because of superficial attraction. All success in business will depend on deceit. Womanliness and manliness will be judged according to one's experience, expertise in sex and human or a man will be known as a Brahmana just by his wearing a thread. Womanliness and manliness will be judged according to one's expertise in sex, and a man will be known as a Brahmana just by his wearing a sacred thread. Just a human life as a whole has a great and serious purpose, namely spiritual liberation. Fundamental human institutions such as marriage and childbearing, rearing, and should also be indicated to the spiritual liberation. Fundamental human institutions as marriage and childbearing should also be dedicated to that great objective. Unfortunately, in the present Kaliyuga, the satisfaction of the sex impulse has become the overriding, if not the exclusive reason for marriage. In the age of Kali, a man will become known as a priest or Brahmana merely by wearing a ceremonial dress. In India, Brahmanas wear a sacred thread, and in other parts of the world, members of the priestly class have other ornaments and symbols. But in the age of Kali, the symbols alone will suffice to establish a person as a religious leader. A person's spiritual position will be ascertained merely according to the external symbols. And on that same basis, people will change from one spiritual order to the next. A person's propriety will be seriously questioned. A person's propriety will be seriously questioned if he does not earn a good living, and one who is very clever at juggling words will be considered a learned scholar. A person will be judged unholy if he does not have money, and hypocrisy will be accepted as virtue. Marriage will be arranged simply by verbal agreement, and a person will think he is fit to appear in public if he has merely taken a bath. The word Damba indicates a self-righteous hypocrite, someone not as much concerned with being saintly as with appearing saintly. In the age of Kaliyuga, there is a large number of self-righteous, hypocritical religious fanatics claiming to have the only one way, the only truth, and the only light. In many Muslim countries, this mentality has resulted in a brutal repression. In many Muslim countries, this mentality has resulted in brutal repression of religious freedom and thus destroyed the opportunity for enlightened spiritual dialectic. Fortunately, in which the Western world, there is a system of free religious expression. Even in the West, however, self-righteous hypocrites consider sincere and saintly flowers of other discipling. Although the flowers of the Krishna consciousness movement strictly avoid illicit sex, intoxication, gambling, and animal killing, and although they dedicate their lives to the constant glorification of God Krishna, self-righteousness, hypocrites claim that such strict austerity and devotion to God are the tricks of the devil. Thus, the sinful are promoted as religion, and the faintly are described as demonic. This pathetic incapacity of thus the sinful are promoted as religions, and the saintly are decreed as demonic. This pathetic incapacity to grasp the most rudimentary criteria of spirituality is a prominent symptom of Kaliyuga. A sacred place will be taken to consist of no more than a reservoir of water located at a distance, and the beauty will be thought to depend on one's hairstyle. Filling the belly will become the goal of life, and one who is audacious will be accepted as truthful. He who can maintain a family will be regarded as an expert man, and the principles of religion will be observed only for the sake of reputation. In India, there are many sacred places through which holy rivers flow. Foolish persons eagerly seek redemption from their sins by bathing in these rivers, but do not take instruction from the lender devotees of the Lord. One should go to the holy places seeking spiritual enlightenment, and that not just of ritualistic bathing only. As the earth thus becomes crowded with a corrupt population, whoever among any of the social classes shows himself to be the strongest will gain political power. Losing their wives and properties to such avaricious and merciless rulers who will behave no better than ordinary thieves. Losing their wives and properties such as avaricious and merciless rulers who will behave no better than ordinary thieves, the citizens will flee to the mountains and forests. Harassed by famine and excessive taxes, people will resort to eating leaves, roots, flesh, and honey, fruits, flowers, and seeds. Struck by drought, they could become completely immune to the diseases of the Kaliyuga, provided they listen to this Bhagavad Purana. Srimad Bhagavad Purana authoritatively describes the future of our planet. Just as a leaf disconnected from plant or a tree dries up, withers, and smuggles and disintegrates. When human society is disconnected from the Supreme Lord, it withers up and disintegrates in violence and chaotic. Despite our computers and rockets, if the Supreme Lord does not send rain, we shall all starve. The citizens will suffer greatly from the cold, wind, heat, rain, and snow. They will be further tormented by quarrels, hunger and thirst, disease, and severe anxiety. The maximum duration of life for human beings in Kaliyuga will become average 50 years. By the time the age of Kali ends, the bodies of all creatures will be greatly reduced in size, and the religious principles of the followers of Varnashrama will be ruined. The path of the Vedas will be completely forgotten in human society, and so-called irreligion will be mostly authentic. The kings will mostly be thieves. The occupations of men will be stealing, lying, and needless violence. And all the social classes will be reduced to the lowest level of Shudras. Cows will be like goats. Spiritual hermitages will be no different from mundane houses. And finally, family ties will extend no further than the immediate bonds of marriage. Most plants and herbs will be tiny. Most plants and herbs will be tiny, and all the trees will appear like a dwarf trees. Clouds will be fully lightning. Homes will be devoid of piety, and all human beings will have become like asses. At that time, the Supreme Personality of Godhead will appear on the earth, acting with the power of pure spiritual goodness. He will rescue eternal religion. Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Person of Godhead, the spiritual master of all moving and non-moving living beings, and the supreme soul of all, takes birth to protect the principles of religion and to relieve his saintly devotees from the reactions of the world. Lord Kalki will appear in the home of the most eminent Brahmana of the Shambhala village, the great soul Vishnu Vyasa. Lord Kalki, the Lord of the universe, will mount his swift horse Devadatta and sworn in hand travel over the earth, exhibiting his 8 mystic opulences and 80 displaying his unequaled effulgency and riding with a great speed. He will kill by the millions whose thieves were there dressed as kings. After all the impostor kings have been killed, the residents of the cities and towns will feel the breeze carrying the most sacred fragrance of the sandalwood paste and other decorations of the Lord Vasudeva, and their minds will thereby becoming transcendental. Nothing can surpass the sublime experiences of being dramatically rescued by a great hero who happens to be the Supreme Lord. The death of the demons at the end of the Kaliyuga is accompanied by fragrant spiritual breezes, and thus the atmosphere becomes most enchanting. When Lord Vasudeva, Supreme Person of Godhead, appears in their hearts in his transcendental form of goodness, the remaining citizens will abundantly repopulate the earth. When the Supreme Lord has appeared in the earth as a Kalki Avatara, the maintainer of the religion, Satya Yuga will begin at the end of Kali Yuga, and human society will bring forth progeny and the mode of goodness. When the moon, the sun, and Brihaspati are together in the constellation of Karkataka, and all the three enter simultaneously into the lunar mansion Pushya, at that exact moment, the age of Satya or Krita Yuga will begin. Thus, I have described all the kings past, present, and future who belong to the dynasties of the sun and the moon. From your birth up to the coronation of King Nanda, 150 years will 150 years, 1,150 years will pass. Although Çukadeva Gosvämé previously described approximately 1,500 years of royal dynasties, it is understood that some overlapping occur between the kings. Therefore, the present chronological calculation should be as authoritative as possible. Of the 7 stars forming the constellation of the 7 sages, Pulaha and Kritu are the first to rise in the night sky. If a line running north and south being drawn by doing of the 7 stars forming the constellation of the 7 sages, that is Saptarishi Mandala, Pulaha and Kritu are the first to rise in the night sky. If a line running north and south were drawn through their midpoint, whichever of the lunar mansions this line passes through is said to be the ruling asterism of the constellation of that time. The 7 sages will remain connected with that particular lunar mansion for 100 human years. Currently, during lifetime, they are situated in the nakshatra called mäyä. The Supreme Lord Vishnu is brilliant like sun and is known as Krishna. When he returned to the spiritual sky, Kali entered this world. and people then began to take pleasure in sinful activities. As long as Lord Krishna, the husband of the goddess of fortune Mahalakshmi, touched the earth with his lotus feet, Kali was powerless to subdue this planet. Although even during the time of Lord Krishna's appearance, the earth Kali had entered the earth to a slight extent through the impious activities of Duryodhana and his allies. Lord Krishna consistently suppressed Kali's influence, and Kali could not flourish into Lord Krishna consistently suppressed Kali's influence. Kali could not flourish until Lord Krishna had left the earth. When the constellation of the seven sages is passing through the lunar mansion Magha, the age of Kali begins. It comprises 1200 years of the demigods. When the great sages of Saptarishi constellation pass from Magha Nakshatra to Purvashada Nakshatra, Kali will have his full strength beginning from King Nanda and his dynasty. Those who scientifically understand the past declare that on the very day that Lord Sri Krishna departed from the spiritual world, the influence of the age of Kali began. Those who scientifically understand the past declare that on the very day that Lord Sri Krishna departed from the spiritual world, the influence of the age Kali began. Although technically Kaliyuga was to begin during the time of the Lord Krishna's presence to the earth, this fallen age had to wait meekly for the departure of Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna. After the 1000 celestial years of Kaliyuga, Satyuga will manifest again. At that time, minds of all men will become self-effulgent. Then I have described the royal dynasty of Manu as it is known on this earth. One can similarly study the history of the Thus, I have described the royal dynasty of Manu as it is known on this earth. One can similarly study the history of the Vaishyas, Shudras, and Brahmanas living in the various ages. Just as the dynasty of kings includes exalted and insignificant virtuous and wicked monarchs, varieties of human character are found in the intellectual, commercial, and laboring orders of society. Thus, these personalities who are great souls are now known only by their names. They exist only in accounts from the past, and only their fame remains on the earth. Although one may consider oneself to be a great, powerful leader, he will ultimately end up as a name in a long list of names. In other words, it is useless to be attached to power and position of the material world. Devapi, the brother of Maharaja Shantanu, and Maru, the descendant of the Ikshwaku, both possesses great mystic strength and are living even now in the village of Kalapa. At the end of the age of Kali, these two kings, having received instruction directly from the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vasudeva, will return to human society and re-establish the eternal religion of man, characterized by the divisions of Varna Ashrama, just as it was before. According to this and the previous verse, the two great kings who will re-establish human culture after the end of Kali Yuga have already descended to the earth, where they are patiently waiting to render their devotion service to Lord Vishnu. The cycle of 4 ages, Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, Kali Yuga, continues perpetually among living beings in this earth, repeating the same general sequence of events. My dear King Parékñit, all these kings I have described, as well as all other human beings, come to this earth and stake their claims, but ultimately they all must give up this world and meet their destruction. Even though a person's body may now have the designation king, in the end its name will be worm, stool, ashes. What can a person who injures other living beings for the sake of his body know about his own self-interest, since his activities are simply leading him to the hell? After the death, the body may be buried and eaten by worms, or it may be thrown in the street or forest to be eaten by animals who will pass out its remnants as a stool, or it may be burned and converted into ashes. Therefore, one should not pave his way to hell by using his temporary body to injure the bodies of other living beings. In this verse, the word bhuta includes non-human life forms. The materialistic kings thinks this unbounded earth was held by my predecessors and is now under my sovereignty. How can I arrange for it to be remain in the hands of my sons, grandsons, and other descendants? This is an example of foolish possessiveness. Although the foolish accept the body made of earth, water, and fire as me, and this earth as mine, in every case they have ultimately abandoned both their body and the earth, passed away into oblivion. Although the soul is eternal, our so-called family tradition and earthly fame will certainly pass into oblivion. My dear King Parékñit, all these kings who tried to enjoy the earth by their strength were reduced by the force of time to do nothing more than historical accounts. The word Rajan, O king, is the significant in this verse. Parékñit Mahäräja was prepared to give up his body and go back home, back to Godhead, Vaikuëöha. And Çukadeva Gosvämé, his most merciful spiritual master, devastated any possible attachment that he might have to the position of king by showing the ultimate insignificance of such a position. By the causeless mercy of the spiritual master, one is prepared to go back home, back to Godhead, Vaikuëöha. The spiritual master teaches one to relax one's strong grip on the material illusion and leave the kingdom of Maya behind. Although Çukadeva Gosvämé speaks very bluntly within this chapter about the so-called glory of the material world, he is exhibiting the causeless mercy of the spiritual master, Lord Krishna, who takes his surrendered disciple back to kingdom of Godhead, Vaikuëöha. So Parékñit Mahäräja, at the end of this Bhagavad Purana, he reached the Vaikuëöha. Lord Krishna take him back to Godhead, Vaikuëöha. Thus, and the purports of the humble servants of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada to the 12th canto, 2nd chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Symptoms of Kaliyuga. In the 3rd chapter again, what are the ways of Kaliyuga Dharma, Kaliyuga Dosha, how to escape from the Kaliyuga Dosha? That comes, we will read that tomorrow. नमोस्तु अनंताय सहस्रमूर्तये सहस्रपादाक्षररूपा सहस्रनाम्ने पुरुषाष्टये सहस्रकोटियुगधारिणे नमः सहस्रकोटियुगधारिणे नमः आकाशात् पतितं यथागत सागरं सर्वदेव नमस्कारः श्रीकेशवं परिगत्यो नमः सर्ववेदेषु यत्पुण्यं सर्वतीर्थेषु यत्फलं तत्फलं प्राप्त वासनात् वासुदेवस्य भाषन्ते जगत्त्रयं सर्वभूतनिवासोऽसि वासुदेवमृते कायेन वाचा मनसेन्द्रियैर्वा बुद्ध्यात्मना वा प्रकृते स्वभावात् करोमि यद्यत् सकलं परस्मै नारायणायेति समर्पयामि नारायणायेति समर्पयामि नारायणायेति समर्पयामि।